At my sister's wedding reception, I offered my name, yet the staff looked baffled. "Sorry, your name isn't on our list." Stunned, I asked my mom. She smirked. "Did you honestly believe you were invited? Strangers aren't permitted." I smiled coolly. "Then I'll live as a stranger." And I walked off. But during the ceremony, my mother's phone kept ringing nonstop. What if I told you that my own mother stood at my sister's wedding, looked me in the eye, and calmly said, "Strangers aren't allowed"? That moment wasn't just a rejection, it was the brutal awakening I desperately needed, confirming I was an outsider in my own family. My name is Amber Hayes, and at 29 years old, I never imagined I'd experience such a profound betrayal from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. This is a story about the agonizing strength it takes to walk away from relationships that are actively destroying you. I grew up in a pretty standard, middle-class suburb outside of Boston. Our house wasn't a mansion, but it was in a good school district. My dad, Richard, always said that was the most important investment he could make for his daughters. Dad was an accountant, and my mom, Diana, was a part-time real estate agent who mostly considered herself a homemaker. My sister, Madison, is 3 years older than me. And honestly, for as long as I can remember, she was Mom's clear favorite. When I was little, I didn't see the favoritism for what it was. I thought Madison got more attention because she was older, or maybe she just needed more help. Madison was pretty, popular, but she really struggled with school. Me? I was the quieter one, always studying, always seeking refuge in books and art. Dad, though. Dad saw me. He'd often sit with me at the dining room table while I drew or painted, telling me how talented I was. Those moments with him, they were precious islands of validation in a household where I often felt completely invisible. Everything changed when I was 15. Dad came home from work, complaining of heartburn. He went to lie down, and he just never got up again. A massive heart attack. It was so sudden, so devastating. I remember standing at his funeral, my mother's arm around Madison's shoulders, while I stood slightly apart, clutching Dad's favorite tie. Mom had let me keep it. After Dad died, that subtle favoritism became shockingly pronounced. Mom threw herself completely into Madison's life. Every social event, every shopping trip, every plan for Madison's future, it all revolved around her. Me? I was expected to be self-sufficient. "You've always been so independent," Amber, Mom would say. It wasn't a compliment. It was her justification for emotional neglect. Despite the emotional desert at home, I thrived academically. In my junior year, I won a prestigious art competition for a portrait series my art teacher had secretly entered. The local newspaper even did a feature on me. And while my mother did display the article on the refrigerator, she always found a way to diminish it. "It's nice that you have your little drawings to keep you busy," she'd say. Or, "Madison could have been artistic, too, if she'd had the time. But she's always been so popular." Madison's jealousy only grew more obvious during my senior year when I received a full scholarship to RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design. What should have been a celebrated achievement became a fresh source of tension. "Guess some people get all the luck," Madison commented during the dinner where I announced my acceptance. Mom was quick to add, "Well, we all know college isn't for everyone. Madison has real-world skills." Moving out for college was a massive emotional relief. I excelled in graphic design, started freelancing in my sophomore year, and after graduation, I landed a job at a boutique design agency in Boston. I finally had my own small apartment. I built a life completely independent of my family, but I still tried so hard to stay connected. Every Sunday, I'd call Mom. Every holiday, I'd show up with thoughtful gifts, enduring the endless subtle comparisons and criticisms. "Madison's boyfriend drives a BMW," Mom would say. Or, "Madison is thinking about buying a house in the suburbs." There was always an implicit comparison, a constant message that left me feeling inadequate. When I was 27, I received a significant promotion at work. I called Mom, bursting with excitement to share the news. Her first response? "That's nice, honey, but Madison just got engaged. Ethan proposed last night with the most beautiful ring." The conversation immediately shifted to wedding plans, how Mom would help plan the social event of the season. Ethan came from a wealthy family, and my mother saw Madison's marriage as her golden ticket, her access to the upper-class social circles she'd been selling houses to for years. Diana Hayes, mother of the bride, finally getting what she truly wanted. I was genuinely happy for Madison. Truly. Despite our complicated relationship, I wanted her to be happy. But I couldn't help feeling that, once again, my achievements were being completely overshadowed. I tried to participate in their excitement. What can I do to help? I offered during a family dinner shortly after the engagement. You're a designer, right? Madison said, as if she'd just remembered what I did for a living. Maybe you could help with the invitations and stuff. That would save us some money. I agreed. I really hoped this might be a way to repair our fractured relationship. Maybe creating something beautiful for Madison's special day would finally earn me the approval and inclusion I'd been seeking from my family for so long. I was willing to try one more time. To be the sister, the daughter, they wanted me to be. Madison and Ethan's engagement lasted 14 months, and wedding planning absolutely consumed my mother and sister. The venue was an exclusive country club where Ethan's parents were members. The guest list swelled to over 200 people, many of whom Madison had never even met, but they were important business associates of Ethan's father or social connections my mother was desperate to impress. True to my word, I offered my professional skills for the wedding materials. I could design custom invitations, I suggested during one of the early planning sessions at my mother's house. It would be my gift to you both. Madison exchanged a look with Mom before responding. That would be helpful, but we need them to be really elegant, like professional quality. I swallowed my pride. I am a professional, Madison. I design materials for luxury brands at my agency. Oh, right, she said, looking slightly embarrassed. Well, if you think you can handle it, that would be great. Over the next several weeks, I spent countless hours creating custom invitation designs, working closely with a high-end printer I knew. I made mood boards, font selections, color schemes that perfectly complemented Madison's chosen wedding colors. I even hand-illustrated delicate floral borders that would become a motif throughout all the wedding materials. The invitations were just the beginning. Soon, I was designing programs, place cards, menus, thank you cards, even custom monogrammed cocktail napkins. What had started as one gift quickly expanded into providing thousands of dollars worth of professional design services for free. Could you make the font a little more, I don't know, fancy? Madison would ask. Or, Mom thinks the border should be gold, not silver. I made every requested change without complaint. I saw each revision as an opportunity to finally earn their approval. 3 months before the wedding, I was browsing the wedding website I had created when I noticed something odd. Under the family section, Madison was listed with my mother and Ethan's family, but my name was nowhere to be found. I told myself it must be an oversight. The next day, I casually mentioned it to Madison over the phone. Hey, I noticed my name isn't on the family section of the website. Oh, weird, she said, sounding distracted. I'll fix that. Probably just an oversight when we were giving the information to you. Weeks passed. Despite sending updated information for various aspects of the website, my name remained absent from the family section. Meanwhile, I still hadn't received an actual invitation. I assumed I wouldn't need one since I was so involved in creating them. But as the RSVPs started coming in, a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. Mom, I said during a call where she was excitedly telling me about Madison's final dress fitting. I never actually received my invitation. I know it sounds silly since I designed them, but I'd like to have one as a keepsake. There was a pause on the line. Oh, Madison is handling the guest list. I'm sure she just assumed you knew you were invited since you're helping so much. That explanation sounded logical, so I let it go. But when I mentioned it to Madison, she was equally vague. You don't need an invitation, Amber. You're family, technically. That technically stung. But I pushed the feeling aside. I was determined to be supportive and not create any drama before the wedding. Maybe this was just wedding stress, making them both act strangely. 6 weeks before the wedding, I spent an entire weekend designing and printing the seating charts and place cards based on the information Madison had provided. When I finished and reviewed everything, I realized my name wasn't on any of the tables. I double-checked all the family tables, thinking there must be a mistake, but I wasn't listed anywhere. I called Madison immediately. I don't see my name on any of the seating arrangements. Oh, she said, sounding uncomfortable. Well, you'll be busy helping coordinate things, right? I figured you wouldn't have time to sit and eat. Madison, I'm not the wedding coordinator. You have Vanessa for that. I've just been helping with the design elements, right? Well, I'll figure something out. Maybe you can sit with some of my college friends or something. Despite these glaring warning signs, I continued to pour my heart into helping prepare for the wedding. I spent money I couldn't really afford on a beautiful emerald green dress that complemented the wedding colors without matching the bridesmaids. I searched for the perfect wedding gift, eventually finding a vintage silver frame that I had custom engraved with their names and wedding date, planning to add a wedding photo later. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I was excited for my sister, but also increasingly anxious about my place in this event and in my family. I tried on my dress one last time, did a practice run of my hair and makeup, and carefully packed everything I would need for the next day. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted, finally, to be enough. The morning of the wedding, I woke early and made myself a strong cup of coffee. I texted Madison a simple, "Good morning, big day, love you," message, which received no response. I tried not to read too much into it. She was the bride, after all, probably overwhelmed. As I drove to the country club, I allowed myself to hope that this day might mark a new beginning for our family. Maybe seeing all my hard work come together would finally help Mom and Madison appreciate me. Maybe being part of this important occasion would finally make me feel like I belonged. I had no idea that the day would instead mark an ending, the final, brutal confirmation that in my family's eyes, I would always be an outsider. I arrived at the country club 3 hours before the ceremony. The parking lot was buzzing, florists unloading arrangements, catering staff setting up, photographers testing lighting. I gathered my bag containing the emergency kit I'd prepared, extra programs, place cards, super glue for any last-minute fixes, and headed inside. The grand entrance hall of the country club was breathtaking, with marble floors and a sweeping staircase. I approached a woman with a clipboard who appeared to be in charge. "Hi, I'm Amber Hayes, the bride's sister. I've been helping with all the design elements and wanted to check if there's anything that needs attention before things get started." The woman, Vanessa, according to her name tag, looked at me with slight confusion. "Oh, you're the designer. I thought you were just handling things remotely. Madison didn't mention you'd be here for setup." "I'm her sister," I repeated, feeling the first twinge of unease. "Right," Vanessa said, checking her clipboard. "Well, everything's under control with the printed materials. The mother of the bride is upstairs with the bridal party if you need to speak with them." Mother of the bride. Not my mother, though she was just the mother of the bride, as if I had no connection to her. I made my way upstairs to the suite where Madison and the bridesmaids were getting ready. Through the door, I could hear laughter and music. I knocked. The door was opened by one of Madison's college friends, whom I'd met a few times. "Oh," she said, clearly surprised to see me. "Amber, right?" "Yes," I said, forcing a smile. "I just wanted to see if Madison needs anything." Before she could respond, my mother appeared at the door. "Amber, what are you doing here so early?" "I came to help," I said. "Make sure all the materials are set up correctly." Mom glanced over her shoulder, then stepped into the hallway, partially closing the door behind her. "Everything's under control. Madison is very busy right now with her bridesmaids. Can I just say hello?" "I won't stay long." Mom sighed. "She's very stressed, Amber. Today needs to be perfect. Maybe you can make yourself useful downstairs. Check on the table arrangements or something." I nodded, swallowing the hurt. "Sure, I'll do that." As I turned to leave, I heard Madison's voice from inside the room. "Is she gone?" "I don't need any drama today." I pretended not to hear and walked away, telling myself that pre-wedding nerves were making everyone act strangely. I headed to the reception hall to check on the setup. The ballroom was stunning, round tables elegantly set with fine china and crystal. My designs were everywhere. From the programs placed on ceremony chairs to the menus at each place setting, the monogrammed cocktail napkins at the bar, and the large seating chart display near the entrance. I felt a small surge of pride seeing my work come to life so beautifully. As I was admiring the centerpieces, I overheard two staff members talking nearby. The mother of the bride was very specific about the guest list, one said quietly. They've had to be careful about keeping certain people away from the important guests. Rich people drama, the other replied with a laugh. I moved away, telling myself they couldn't possibly be referring to me. Yet, the knot in my stomach tightened. The hours passed quickly as guests began to arrive for the ceremony. I slipped into the garden where chairs had been arranged, taking a seat in the back row. No one acknowledged me or asked why I wasn't with the family. The ceremony was beautiful, Madison looking radiant in her designer gown as she walked down the aisle on our mother's arm. I noticed Mom crying happy tears, something I'd never seen her do for any of my achievements. After the ceremony, guests were directed to a cocktail hour on the terrace while the wedding party took photos. I stood alone, watching from a distance as Madison, Ethan, my mother, and Ethan's family posed for picture after picture. No one called me over to join them. When it was time for the reception, guests began lining up at the entrance to the ballroom where staff were checking names against the guest list. I joined the line, rehearsing in my head how I would laugh off the obvious oversight when I explained I was the bride's sister. When my turn came, I smiled at the young man with the tablet. Amber Hayes. He scrolled through his list, then scrolled again, looking increasingly uncomfortable. I'm sorry. I don't see that name. There must be a mistake, I said, maintaining my smile. I'm Madison Hayes' sister. Well, she's Madison Reynolds now, I suppose. He checked again. I'm really sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't on the list. I need to check with the coordinator. He waved over Vanessa, who looked annoyed at being interrupted. They had a whispered conversation with occasional glances in my direction. Vanessa approached me with a tight smile. There seems to be some confusion. Your name isn't on the approved guest list. That's impossible, I said, feeling heat rise to my face. I'm the bride's sister. I designed all the materials for the wedding. Yes, we're grateful for your design work, Vanessa said carefully. But I can only admit guests who are on the list approved by the bride and mother of the bride. I saw my mother approaching from inside the ballroom, likely alerted by the commotion. What's going on here? She asked, her voice controlled, but with an edge of irritation. Mom, they're saying I'm not on the guest list. I explained, certain she would clear things up immediately. Instead, she gave me a cold look I'll never forget. Did you really think you were invited? Strangers aren't allowed. The words hit me like a physical blow. Strangers. Mom, I'm your daughter. Madison's sister. You haven't been part of this family in any meaningful way for years, Amber, she said quietly, so the nearby guests couldn't hear. You've always chosen to keep yourself separate. Madison wanted her special day to be perfect, with no awkwardness or tension. Surely you can understand that. I stood there utterly stunned. All those months of work on the wedding materials, the thoughtful gift, the expensive dress I was wearing, all based on the assumption that I was actually invited to celebrate my own sister's wedding. In that moment, something broke inside me, but also something clarified. Years of subtle exclusion suddenly made perfect, sickening sense. I wasn't just less favored, I was unwanted. I looked my mother directly in the eyes and said with remarkable calm, "Then I'll live like a stranger." I turned and walked away, head held high, even as my world collapsed behind me. I heard Vanessa asking my mother if everything was all right, and my mother's dismissive response, just a misunderstanding with a vendor. Everything's fine. A vendor. That's all I was to them. Someone to provide a service and then disappear. As I walked through the grand entrance hall toward the exit, I caught a glimpse of myself in a large, ornate mirror. I was still Amber Hayes, still standing, still breathing, despite having just been shattered into 1,000 pieces. I straightened my shoulders and continued walking, each step taking me further from the family that had never truly been mine. The country club's massive oak doors closed behind me with a heavy thud that seemed to punctuate the finality of what had just happened. I stood on the wide stone steps, suddenly very aware of the ridiculous green heels I'd spent too much money on. They were already starting to pinch my feet, and I had nowhere to go. My car was in the far corner of the parking lot. I started walking toward it, each step sending shooting pain through my feet and up my ankles. It felt appropriate somehow. Physical pain to match the emotional trauma I'd just experienced. Halfway to my car, I stopped. The reality of what had just happened hit me fully, and my legs simply wouldn't carry me any further. I spotted a small stone bench near a decorative fountain and made my way to it, sinking down as my composure finally began to crack. I sat there watching water cascade from the fountain, the sound providing a strange, soothing backdrop to my unraveling. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, memories began flooding back, one after another, each recontextualizing in light of this final rejection. My 16th birthday, when Mom and Madison had forgotten and gone shopping together. The high school graduation party, where I'd overheard Mom telling her friends how Madison had been the one to really struggle after Dad died, with no mention of my grief. College move-in day, when Mom had dropped me off with a quick hug while she rushed back for Madison's sorority event. Every single holiday where my gifts were opened with polite acknowledgement while Madison's were met with genuine excitement. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern so consistent that I had normalized it, made excuses for it, even blamed myself for it. But sitting on that bench, in my expensive dress and painful shoes, I couldn't deny the truth any longer. I had never been wanted. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would come without question. Stephanie, it's Amber. I need you. Stephanie Lewis had been my roommate in college and remained my closest friend. She lived about 30 minutes from the country club, and I knew she'd been surprised when I told her I wasn't allowed to bring a +1 to the wedding. What's wrong? You sound strange, she said immediately. They didn't invite me, I said, my voice finally breaking. I'm sitting outside. They wouldn't let me in. What? That's impossible. You're the bride's sister. Apparently, that doesn't matter. Can you come get me? I don't think I should drive right now. I'm already putting on my shoes. Stay put. While waiting for Stephanie, I sat perfectly still, afraid that any movement might cause me to completely fall apart. A few guests arrived late, giving me curious glances as they hurried past. I wondered what they saw. A woman in formal attire, sitting alone by a fountain, staring into space. Did I look as hollowed out as I felt? When Stephanie's blue Honda pulled up 28 minutes later, I rose mechanically and walked toward it. She jumped out and met me halfway, pulling me into a fierce hug. Those absolute monsters, she whispered into my hair. I never liked your mother, but this is a new low, even for her. In the safety of Stephanie's car, the tears finally came. They weren't delicate, dignified tears, but ugly, violent sobs that seemed to tear themselves from my chest. Stephanie handed me tissues and drove in silence, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand. I designed everything, I choked out between sobs. The invitations, the programs, the place cards, everything they're using in there has my work on it. But I wasn't good enough to attend. This isn't about you not being good enough, Stephanie said firmly. This is about them being terrible people. You hear me? Terrible people. We arrived at Stephanie's apartment, and she helped me inside. In her spare bedroom, I changed out of my green dress, carefully hanging it up, though I knew I'd never wear it again. Stephanie lent me sweatpants and a t-shirt, then made tea while I washed the makeup from my tear-stained face. Check your phone, she called from the kitchen. I bet people are wondering where you are. I hadn't looked at my phone since calling Stephanie. Now I saw several notifications. There were new posts on Madison's wedding hashtag, photos of the ceremony, the first dance, the cake cutting. My designs were visible in many of the shots, but I was nowhere to be seen. There were also text messages, not from my mother or Madison, but from distant relatives. Great seeing everyone except you today. Missed you at the wedding. Where were you hiding during the reception? Wanted to say hello. Didn't see you at Madison's wedding. Everything okay? And then, a message from my mother. Your behavior was completely unacceptable. You've embarrassed the entire family. We'll discuss this after the honeymoon. My behavior. As if I had done something wrong by simply existing, by expecting to be treated like a member of the family. What does it say? Stephanie asked, returning with 2 mugs of tea. I showed her my mother's message, and her face hardened. Block her, she said. Block both of them, at least for now. I can't just, you can. You should. They don't get to hurt you like this, and then dictate the terms of your response. I stared at my phone, my finger hovering over the block button. My entire life had been spent trying to earn love and acceptance from my family. Could I really cut them off so easily? They already cut you off, Amber, Stephanie said gently, reading my thoughts. You're just acknowledging what they've already done. I blocked them both, then turned off my phone entirely. The silence felt both terrifying and liberating. That night, curled up in Stephanie's guest bed, I experienced waves of emotions: grief, rage, humiliation, and occasionally, brief moments of numb relief. It was as if a weight I'd been carrying for years had been violently torn away, leaving me both lighter and completely unbalanced. Who am I if I'm not the person desperately trying to be good enough for Diana and Madison Hayes? I whispered into the darkness. I didn't have an answer yet, but for the first time, I was ready to find out. The week following the wedding was the lowest point of my adult life. I called in sick to work on Monday, unable to face explaining what had happened to my colleagues. One day turned into 5 as I remained in Stephanie's guest room, alternating between sleeping for 12 hours straight and lying awake at 3 a.m., replaying every family interaction I could remember, searching for signs I should have recognized earlier. Stephanie brought me food that I barely touched and sat with me in silence when I couldn't speak. She handled practical matters, too, driving to my apartment to get clothes and my laptop, calling my boss to explain I had a family emergency, a phrase that now seemed bitterly ironic, and screening calls from concerned friends. On Wednesday, I turned my phone back on and was immediately flooded with notifications. There were more messages from relatives, a few concerned texts from coworkers, and multiple missed calls from my mother. There was nothing from Madison. I listened to one voicemail from my mother. Amber, this childish behavior needs to stop. You're making a scene over nothing. Call me back immediately. Over nothing. Being publicly rejected and humiliated by my only family was nothing to her. I deleted the message and all the others without listening to them. Then I opened social media, immediately regretting it when I saw my feed dominated by wedding photos. In one image, my mother stood between Madison and Ethan, beaming with pride. The caption read, "Our perfect little family on this special day." Our perfect little family. A family that very explicitly did not include me. I closed the apps and put my phone away, sinking further into depression. The question that kept circling in my mind was, what had I done to deserve this? What fatal flaw did I possess that made me so unlovable to the people who should have loved me most? By Friday, Stephanie had had enough of watching me spiral. She marched into the guest room, opened the blinds, and sat on the edge of the bed. "Get up," she said, not unkindly. "Shower, get dressed. We're going out." "I can't," I mumbled, pulling the blanket over my head. She yanked it back down. "You can and you will. You're going to see a therapist today." I called Dr. Rivera. She had a cancellation and can see you at 2. "A therapist?" "Steph, I don't need—" "Yes, you do," she interrupted. "This isn't normal sadness, Amber. This is trauma. You need professional help, not just me bringing you soup and letting you hide from the world." I wanted to argue, but I didn't have the energy. And deep down, I knew she was right. This pain went beyond ordinary family disagreements or disappointments. This was about a lifetime of conditional love and systematic exclusion that had culminated in the most public rejection possible. Dr. Rivera's office was warm and surprisingly non-clinical, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. The therapist herself was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that somehow put me at ease. "Tell me why you're here, Amber," she said after initial introductions. I took a deep breath and told her everything. Not just about the wedding, but about the years of subtle favoritism, the constant seeking of approval. The way I had built my entire identity around trying to be good enough for people who would never see me that way. "What you're describing sounds like a family dynamic with narcissistic patterns," Dr. Rivera said when I finished. "Your mother appears to have cast Madison in the role of the golden child, and you as the scapegoat. These aren't conscious choices on her part, but deep-seated patterns that likely stem from her own upbringing and psychological needs. So, it's not that I did something wrong? I asked, embarrassed by how small my voice sounded. No, Amber. Children don't earn or deserve mistreatment. You were placed in this role for reasons that have everything to do with your mother's limitations and nothing to do with your worth. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Then why does it hurt so much? If I know intellectually that it's not my fault, why do I still feel like there must be something fundamentally wrong with me? Because you've internalized these messages since childhood. Your brain formed during these experiences, learning that love was conditional and that you were somehow less deserving than your sister. Unlearning those beliefs is possible, but it takes time and work. Over the next 2 weeks, I continued seeing Dr. Rivera twice weekly. I returned to my own apartment, but spent most evenings with Stephanie or on video calls with other friends. I went back to work, throwing myself into projects that had nothing to do with weddings or family celebrations. During a particularly difficult therapy session, Dr. Rivera suggested I look through old family photos, not to reminisce, but to observe the patterns with new awareness. That night, I pulled out the photo albums I'd taken when I moved out of my mother's house. There weren't many pictures of me alone, I realized. I was almost always in group shots, often standing slightly apart or being held by my father rather than my mother. In one Christmas photo taken when I was about 7, I was opening a present while Madison watched. Even then, I could see it in my expression, the hopeful anxiety, the desperate desire for approval. I had been performing my whole life for an audience that had already decided not to applaud. Near the bottom of the box of photos, I found something I'd forgotten. A letter my father had written to me when I won a school art contest in 5th grade. He'd been away on a business trip and couldn't attend the ceremony, but had left this note for me to open afterward. My dearest Amber, it read, I'm so sorry I couldn't be there today to see you receive your award. I know how hard you worked on your painting, and I couldn't be prouder of you. You have a special way of seeing the world that is entirely your own. Never lose that perspective, even when others don't understand it. Being different isn't a flaw. It's your greatest strength. All my love, Dad. I traced his handwriting with my finger, feeling a connection to him that transcended the years since his death. He had seen me, really seen me, and loved what he saw. That was a truth I could hold on to, a foundation I could build upon. In my next session with Dr. Rivera, I brought up my father's letter. He was the only one who ever really accepted me for who I was, I said. After he died, there was no one left in my family who did. But there are people in your life now who do, she pointed out. Stephanie, your other friends, me, and most importantly, you're learning to accept yourself. How do I do that? I asked. How do I stop measuring my worth by whether my mother and sister want me around? By recognizing that their assessment isn't accurate or fair. By understanding that their rejection says more about their limitations than about your value. And by building a life that isn't centered around winning approval you may never receive. I nodded slowly. I think I've been waiting my whole life for them to change. To suddenly see me and love me the way I needed. But that's never going to happen, is it? I can't predict the future, Dr. Rivera said carefully. People sometimes do grow and change, but you can't build your life around waiting for that possibility. You need to live for yourself now. That night, I researched family estrangement and toxic relationships. I joined online forums where others shared similar experiences. I wasn't alone in this pain. I realized many people had faced the devastating recognition that their families of origin couldn't or wouldn't provide the love and acceptance they deserved. Reading their stories of grief, healing, and eventually building fulfilling lives gave me hope. Many had created families of choice that provided the support and love their biological families hadn't. Others had established limited, carefully boundary-defined relationships with toxic relatives. Some had cut ties completely. There wasn't a single right answer, I realized. But what all these stories had in common was a moment of clarity. A point where the person stopped blaming themselves and recognized the dynamic for what it was. My wedding rejection had been my moment of clarity. As painful as it was, it had torn away the veil of denial I'd been hiding behind. I couldn't unsee the truth now. And while that brought grief, it also brought possibility. I wasn't the problem. I never had been. And that meant I didn't need to fix myself to be worthy of love. I already was. 3 weeks after the wedding, I was ready to take more active steps toward healing. Dr. Rivera had helped me develop a self-care routine that included morning journaling, regular exercise, and meditation. These practices weren't magical solutions, but they provided structure and small moments of peace during a time when everything felt chaotic. I returned to work full-time, throwing myself into new projects. My creative director noticed the change in my work, a new boldness and emotional depth that hadn't been there before. "There's something different about your designs lately," she commented during a review meeting. "They're more authentic, more impactful. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." What I was doing was channeling my pain into my art, finding visual expressions for feelings I couldn't always put into words. Ironically, being rejected by my family was making me a better designer. At Dr. Rivera's suggestion, I drafted an email to my mother and Madison, setting clear boundaries for our future interactions. I didn't send it immediately, letting it sit in my drafts folder while I considered exactly what I wanted to say. Meanwhile, the messages from my mother continued, growing increasingly manipulative. "Your sister is devastated that you're creating this drama during her honeymoon," one text read. Another said, "I raised you better than this, Amber. This silent treatment is childish and cruel." I showed these messages to Dr. Rivera during a session. "Notice how she's flipping the narrative," the therapist pointed out. "In her version, you're the one causing harm by reacting to their actions, not them harming you with the initial rejection." "Classic Darvo," I said, referring to the acronym she taught me. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. Exactly. And how does reading these messages make you feel? I considered the question. A month ago, they would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and self-doubt. Now, I just felt sad. Sad that she can't take responsibility. Sad that this is the mother I got. "That's progress," Dr. Rivera said with an approving nod. "Tremendous progress." After another week of reflection, I finalized my email. "Mom and Madison, I'm writing to address what happened at the wedding and to establish clear boundaries going forward. Being deliberately excluded from Madison's wedding after contributing significant time, skill, and emotional energy to the preparations made it painfully clear how you both view me and my place in this family. I need time and space to process this hurt. During this period, I ask that you respect my need for distance. Please do not contact me for at least 3 months. After that time, if I choose to reestablish communication, it will be on different terms than before. I will no longer accept being treated as an afterthought or an inconvenience. I will no longer work to earn love that should be freely given. I deserve better, and I'm finally ready to insist on it. This isn't about punishment or drama. It's about self-preservation and setting healthy boundaries. I hope someday you can understand that, Amber." I sent the email on a Sunday morning, then turned off my phone and went for a long walk in the Boston Public Garden. When I returned and checked my messages, there were multiple missed calls and texts from both my mother and Madison. Exactly what I'd expected. Madison's text was brief but cutting, "Way to make everything about you as usual." My mother's was longer and hit all the familiar notes: guilt, obligation, denial, and manipulation. "I don't know what fantasy you've concocted in your head, but this is completely uncalled for. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By abandoning your family? Your sister is heartbroken. I'm heartbroken. If your father could see this behavior." I didn't respond to either message. Instead, I blocked their numbers, at least temporarily. It was a boundary I needed to maintain for my own well-being. The following weeks brought unexpected changes. Without the emotional drain of trying to please my family, I had more energy for other relationships and pursuits. I joined a local art collective, volunteered at a community center teaching design skills to teenagers, and reconnected with college friends I'd lost touch with. One rainy Tuesday, I stopped at a coffee shop near my apartment to work on some freelance projects. While waiting in line, I dropped my sketchbook and a man behind me picked it up. As he handed it back, he glanced at the page it had fallen open to, a series of logo concepts I was developing. "These are really good," he said. "Are you a designer?" His name was Jason Mitchell, and he was a photographer who specialized in architectural and interior design photography. We ended up sharing a table and talking for over an hour about creative processes, client challenges, and our favorite designers. "Would you want to get coffee again sometime?" he asked as we were leaving. "Or dinner? I'd love to see more of your work." It wasn't until I was walking home that I realized he might have been asking me out, not just expressing professional interest. The thought made me pause. Was I ready for that? After a moment's reflection, I decided it didn't matter if I was ready. I was willing to find out. Jason and I began seeing each other, sometimes for professional collaboration, sometimes for dates, often for both. He was thoughtful and direct in a way that was refreshing after years of navigating my family's indirect communications and hidden agendas. When he said he'd call, he called. When he had a concern, he expressed it. When he enjoyed something about me, he said so plainly. "I like how your mind works," he told me one evening as we walked along the Charles River. "You see connections that other people miss." These simple affirmations meant more to me than any compliment I'd ever received. There was no performance required, no hoops to jump through. Jason liked me as I was, not as I pretended to be. As my personal life blossomed, I also made a significant professional decision. I began looking for a new apartment in a different neighborhood, wanting a fresh start in a place that didn't hold memories of rushing to family dinners where I'd feel excluded, or returning home dejected after another disappointing interaction. I found a sunny one-bedroom in Jamaica Plain, further from my office, but in a vibrant community with more artists and creative professionals. The move was both physically exhausting and emotionally liberating. Each item I packed represented a choice about what to bring into my new life and what to leave behind. In my new space, I created a home office that doubled as a studio for personal creative projects. I painted the walls a soft sage green that made me feel calm and grounded. I hung art by local artists I admired and friends whose work inspired me. I made every decision based solely on what I wanted, not what anyone else would think. 3 months passed, then 4. The holiday season approached, traditionally a time when family obligations would have dominated my thoughts and schedule. My mother emailed, ignoring the boundaries I'd set in my previous message. "Thanksgiving dinner will be at 3 p.m. Madison and Ethan will be there. I expect you to put this nonsense behind you and behave like an adult. Family is family." I drafted and redrafted my response several times before settling on, "Thank you for the invitation, but I won't be attending Thanksgiving this year. I wish you a pleasant holiday." It was polite but firm. No explanations, no apologies, no opening for negotiation. Instead of the traditional family Thanksgiving, I accepted Stephanie's invitation to a friend-giving gathering. Jason came too, meeting my closest friends for the first time. We ate too much, played board games, and laughed until my sides hurt. Not once did I feel I was performing or seeking approval. Not once did I feel less than or unwelcome. As the evening wound down, Stephanie pulled me aside. "How are you really doing with everything?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm doing authentically," I finally said. "Sometimes that means I'm sad or angry. Sometimes it means I'm happier than I ever remember being. But it's all real now. I'm not pretending anymore." She hugged me tightly. That's all any of us can ask for. The wedding rejection that had once felt like the end of my world had become the beginning of a new one. A world built on genuine connections, clear boundaries, and the radical notion that I was enough exactly as I was. 1 year after Madison's wedding, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark days following the rejection. My design business was thriving. I had left the agency to start my own boutique studio specializing in branding for small creative businesses. My relationship with Jason had deepened into something solid and nurturing. My apartment had become a true home, filled with art, plants, and frequent gatherings of friends. I still saw Dr. Rivera monthly, now focusing less on crisis management and more on continued growth and occasional navigation of family situations. The work we'd done together had helped me develop what she called an internal validation system, the ability to assess my own worth without relying on external approval, particularly from my family. This new foundation was tested when, 13 months after the wedding, Madison called me out of the blue. I had maintained minimal contact with my family, exchanging brief, civil emails around holidays and birthdays, but nothing more. Seeing Madison's name on my phone screen sent a jolt of anxiety through me, but it was milder than it would have been before. I answered with a simple, "Hello, Madison." "Amber." Her voice sounded strained. I need to talk to you." "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone neutral. What followed was unexpected. Madison's perfect marriage was in trouble. Ethan had been working constantly, leaving her alone in their expensive suburban house. My mother had been pressuring them about starting a family, adding tension to an already strained relationship. Madison was miserable and didn't know who to turn to. "Mom just keeps saying I need to be more understanding about Ethan's work hours, that all successful men are busy," she said, her voice breaking. "She says I should be grateful for the lifestyle he provides and stop complaining." I recognized the pattern immediately. Our mother, prioritizing status and appearances over genuine emotional needs. For the first time, Madison was experiencing what it felt like to have her feelings dismissed. "That sounds really difficult," I said carefully. "I'm sorry you're going through this." "I thought about what you said in that email last year," Madison continued, "about not accepting being treated as an afterthought, about deserving better." She paused. "I didn't get it then. Maybe I'm starting to now." It would have been easy to respond with bitterness or righteous satisfaction. Part of me wanted to say, "How does it feel to be on the receiving end for once?" But that wouldn't help either of us move forward. Instead, I said, "It's never too late to start recognizing your own worth, Madison." We talked for nearly an hour, not as close sisters picking up where we left off, but as two adults, cautiously building something new. I listened more than I spoke, offering support without overcommitting. When she asked if we could get coffee sometime, I agreed, but suggested a public cafe rather than either of our homes. After the call, I sat in my window seat, watching the autumn leaves swirl in the courtyard below. I felt strangely peaceful. Madison's reaching out didn't erase the past harm, but it suggested the possibility of a different future. Not the idealized family reconciliation I once would have desperately wanted, but perhaps something more honest and, ultimately, healthier. The coffee meeting with Madison was awkward, but civil. We stuck to safe topics, mostly her work as an event coordinator, my new business, neutral childhood memories involving our father. As we were leaving, she hesitantly mentioned Thanksgiving. "Mom's expecting everyone at her house as usual," she said. "Would you consider coming?" Ethan and I would be there, and his parents. I had prepared for this question. "I appreciate the invitation, Madison, but I'll be hosting my own Thanksgiving this year with friends. You and Ethan would be welcome to join us if you'd like to try something different." Her surprise was evident. "You're hosting Thanksgiving?" "Yes. It won't be as formal as Mom's, but the food will be good and the company will be warm." Madison didn't accept my invitation, which didn't surprise me. But the fact that I had extended it on my own terms, from a place of strength rather than need, felt significant. My mother's reaction to hearing about our coffee meeting came in the form of a lengthy email, alternating between statements like, "I'm glad you girls are finally putting this nonsense behind you," and subtle digs like, "I always knew you'd come around eventually when you were ready to be mature about things." In the past, I would have analyzed every word, looking for genuine approval while internalizing the criticism. Now, I simply noted the familiar patterns and responded with a brief, "I'm glad Madison and I had a chance to talk as well. I hope you're doing well." The shift in my response to my mother wasn't lost on Jason, who had witnessed some of my earlier reactions to family communications. "You used to get so anxious whenever your mom contacted you," he observed one evening as we cooked dinner together. "Now you just seem, I don't know, unaffected." I considered this as I chopped vegetables. "Not unaffected exactly," I said. "More like, I see her clearly now. I understand her limitations. I know her approval isn't necessary for my happiness, and her disapproval doesn't determine my worth." Jason smiled. "That's a big change from the woman I met a year ago who apologized for having opinions about where we should have dinner." He was right. The woman I'd been before the wedding rejection had been so afraid of disapproval that she'd made herself small, avoiding conflict at all costs. The woman I was now understood that healthy disagreement was part of authentic relationships, and that true connection required showing up as my full, imperfect self. As another holiday season approached, I made good on my plan to host Thanksgiving. Our guest list included Stephanie and her boyfriend, Jason, several friends from the art collective, 2 former colleagues, and a few neighbors from my building. Madison and Ethan declined, as expected, but to my surprise, they sent a lovely bottle of wine and a handwritten note wishing us a happy holiday. The day was chaotic and wonderful. Too many cooks in my small kitchen. A turkey that took longer than expected. Spirited debates about movies and books. Board games that got increasingly competitive as the evening progressed. Looking around at the mismatched chairs and borrowed plates, the diverse group of people who had chosen to spend their holiday together, I felt a profound sense of completion. This was family. Not defined by blood or obligation, but by mutual care and choice. These people saw me, valued me, and wanted me present, not for what I could do for them, but simply for who I was. The wedding rejection that had once seemed like the ultimate confirmation of my unworthiness had actually been the beginning of my liberation. By walking away from people who couldn't love me properly, I had created space for those who could. By releasing the exhausting pursuit of conditional approval, I had found the energy to build a life that truly reflected my values and desires. One evening in December, I received a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to since the wedding. She was in town for a conference and wondered if we could meet for coffee. We arranged to meet at my favorite cafe near my apartment. I heard about what happened at Madison's wedding, she said after we'd exchanged initial pleasantries. Aunt Diana told everyone you had a scheduling conflict, but I figured that wasn't the whole story. I smiled slightly. No, it wasn't. You seem good though, she observed. Better than I remember seeing you at family gatherings, actually. I am good, I confirmed. It turns out that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best version of yourself. As I walked home from the cafe, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. There were still moments of grief for the family relationships I had wanted but never had. But those moments no longer defined me or determined my choices. I had learned that family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who you choose, and who chooses you in return. I had learned that love shouldn't require constant performance or proving yourself worthy. Most importantly, I had learned that walking away from people who can't see your value isn't giving up. It's an act of profound self-respect. The stranger I had promised to become that day at the wedding reception wasn't really a stranger at all. She was the authentic self I had always been, beneath the layers of people-pleasing and approval-seeking. By walking away from conditional love, I had finally found my way home to myself. Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship that was hurting you, even though society says, but they're family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the family you create is more nurturing than the one you were born into. Take care.